Welcome back, geographers. So, imagine you get this essay in your A-Level Geography exam. Assess the extent to which tectonic disasters scale is more a result of the physical characteristics of the hazard. Most students would panic, not because they don't know the case studies, but because they don't know how to structure the argument. Today I'm going to show you the single most powerful method for writing up top band, top tier, top level tectonics essays. And to be honest, it's something that can be applied to every single essay that you come across in A-Level Geography, whether it be a 12 marker, whether it be a 20 marker, whether it be in paper 1, 2 or 3, and that is using the perspective model. This is a technique that helps you build debate, add complexity, and show geographical thinking. And this is exactly what the examiners want from you. So stick around until the end, because what I'm going to give you is a ready-to-use 4-perspective template that you can apply to not only any tectonics essay, but to carbon, to coasts, to water, to globalization, to superpowers. It is an extremely versatile model, so stick around. So one of the main reasons why students aren't hitting that top level bracket is because they just go for that good old case study dump. Boom! And they're of the belief that because they've put that content in there that they are going to be hitting that level 3. All I need to do is just show that I know how many people died in Haiti 2010, 230,000 deaths, or to know that Pinatubo was a VEI 6. Or in Japan, 2011, 56% of the deaths were in the 65 plus age bracket, and that represented only 23% of the population. These are simply facts. You've got to include them to get high level marks, but essays at A level, they require argument. Top band answers, they compare, they evaluate, and they contrast across place, time, spatial scale, and stakeholders. So the perspective method of planning your responses and actually writing your responses ensures that you do this, and it ensures that you are being evaluative throughout the entire essay and that it evolves as this ever-evolving debate. Now, the place perspective method lets you do this without overthinking. Each paragraph essentially becomes a mini debate where you can show that you can debate things from that spatial, time, stakeholder perspective. So in the context of this essay, from one perspective, physical factors might dominate, and this might be at the global perspective, and then from another perspective, maybe the local perspective, maybe we can think about human factors being slightly more influential in terms of that scale of tectonic disaster. So the perspective essentially becomes a lens that you look at the same question just from different viewpoints. So when you look at a perspective, you can essentially analyze how your judgment can change on what the most influential thing might be. So then your case studies become not just an opportunity to drop some statistics, but they become contextualized evidence for the argument that you're making. So instead of just saying things like Eyjafjallajökull 2010 caused travel chaos, flights were grounded for 7 days, you can talk about why the physical factors were so significant in causing that, and why these physical factors essentially led us to the conclusion that at the global scale, physical factors might be the most important factor, particularly with volcanic eruptions because of the aerial extent of tephra clouds. And for more local scales like Haiti, you don't just say that buildings collapsed and that was the reason why it was such a large scale of disaster. You don't just drop those statistics that 90% of the buildings were non-aseismic. You've got to link this to, and this is a local scale thing where these were human vulnerabilities because there have been earthquakes of higher magnitude and there's been less deaths. So it must be the case that sometimes at the local scales, particularly with things like earthquakes, where we've got human factors being more influential than physical ones. So let's compare what your paragraphs might currently look like in terms of maybe that case study dump style response that you might be giving, or maybe even case study dump style response that's backed up by some theory, but that doesn't necessarily contain any judgment or link back to the question, and compare it to a new style that you should be going for that involves this perspective focus. So let's first look at Iceland 2010. Now this is what a typical paragraph might look like if you are kind of stuck in that level 2, 7 or 8 out of 12 bracket and you're thinking, how on earth can I push towards level 3? So I'll read it out for you. Physical characteristics are important because when volcanoes erupt, they eject tephra clouds, which make their way into the atmosphere. As well as causing respiratory issues in local communities, they can also cause flights to be grounded, as was the case in Iceland in 2010 when a VEI 3 volcano erupted beneath the North Atlantic jet stream and carried ash towards Europe. Hundreds 200,000 flights were grounded, costing around 50 billion in losses due to the disruption of global supply chains. So it's got all the hallmarks of a classically strong paragraph within geography. There's theory, it's all correct, it's all relevant, it relates to the question, it's talking about physical characteristics. So what's missing here? Well, what's missing is judgment. So what I'm going to take you through now is what the paragraph could look like when we transfer it from level 2 to level 3. And what you'll see is all I've done is use some slight tweaks with the language use, and then we can just jump this up to a higher scoring paragraph. So this example on the right just here is an example of how we've leveled up that paragraph. We're taking exactly the same content, but all we're doing, either side of that content, is wrapping it in judgment and geographical analysis. The importance of physical characteristics is dependent on our spatial scale of analysis. So immediately what we're doing is we're giving the examiner, here's my framework of analysis. Here's the lens that I'm looking at this debate from. I'm going to present you with other lenses which will allow me to debate this issue further. It's setting up for, right, this is going to be a level 3 response. I would say they are of greater importance, fundamentally essential that you use judgmental language like this. And it's not only the use of that language, it's the justified use of that language, which you'll see in a second. But I would say they are of greater importance at global scales, particularly when considering volcanic eruptions. So we're being nice and specific. Not only are we talking about particular spatial scales, we're talking about specific types of tectonic hazards. Then what you do is you take the original knowledge that you know you've already got and you just insert it there. Tell exactly the same story. The examiner still wants to see that you can fully explain things, that you know theory, that you know that AO1. And then we kind of summarize in a way like this to link back to the question and link back to our framework of analysis. The fact that ash makes its way into the global commons of the atmosphere means global scale impacts are possible. Whereas at local scales of analysis, human factors related to vulnerability and resilience become more influential in disaster scale, particularly with earthquakes. Bring it Haiti. And then what you're immediately doing is you're setting up the next paragraph that becomes the next side of the debate, the next side of the argument. And suddenly, before you know it, you've got a couple of paragraphs where you've got judgment, you've got location-based AO1, you've got theory, you're onto a winner. So this would be the example of the follow-up paragraph that we talked about before when you're talking about bringing in Haiti as your counter-argument. Because obviously what's going to be essential is that you include some justification for human factors being more important within this essay. The emphasis on the question is on the importance of physical factors. So for you to properly assess and to properly provide balance, which is absolutely essential, it's a word in the mark scheme, then you are going to have to justify these human factors, and this is what we can do. So remember, the perspective that we brought in at first was that at global scales, yeah, the physical factors could be considered more important, particularly when physical factors or physical characteristics of a hazard actually lead to enormous aerial extents for whatever reason, but they are purely physical reasons. At local scales, where the aerial extent is smaller, i.e. with earthquakes, where it's a few kilometers from the epicenter, human factors could be considered more influential, as there's more potential to modify the event through the use of mitigation strategies. Ability to do this depends on levels of economic development. That is a fundamentally human influential factor, which according to the PAR model, I'm just going to pause there because it's always a great idea, if you can, in your Tectonics essays to bring in theoretical model. That elevates the level of your response because it's no longer just conversational geography. It now becomes academic geography. That's what the examiners are looking for. At A-level, you have to show a sophisticated level of understanding for the topic that you are writing about. So, according to the PAR model, it's a major root cause of vulnerability. Haiti in 2010 with a GDP of 12 billion, 72% of the population lived on under $2 a day. This meant an inability to afford seismic housing, so 90% was made from a weak concrete. This led to 200 homes collapsing, leading to 230,000 deaths. Now, a really important point to finish off this paragraph here is that we're making some form of comparison to really drive home and find that evidence that human factors could be considered more important at local scales. So this part here becomes a really important summary. So the Haiti earthquake was a 7 magnitude. The Chile 2015 earthquake was an 8.3, so it's higher magnitude. Magnitude is a physical characteristic that's often associated with higher scales of disaster. Not necessarily in this case, because there were only 15 deaths. So it's evidence for the fact that the local scale, the human influence, is more important. Now, the bit that I didn't have a chance to include here is that obviously Chile has a higher level of economic development, and they were able to implement more aseismic structures, and therefore the death toll was lower, even though the magnitude was higher. Now let's look at tsunamis. Now, two case studies that I think you really should be going into the exam knowing are Tohoku 2011, and you've got to know Indian Ocean 2004 as well. So let's see how we can use these more effectively. Now, the tendency with tsunamis is, again, to do that case study dump. You think like you're putting in the Tohoku 2011 tsunami, and if you're putting in the Indian Ocean 2004 tsunami, that you are making judgments. Look, the magnitude of the hazard itself caused this many impacts. The question's not asking you to simply state whether or not you know the impacts from these high magnitude tsunamis. What it's asking you to do is accept that the outcomes from both of these tectonic disasters were a mixture of both human vulnerabilities and the physical characteristics of the hazard. That's the case in every single tectonic disaster. What we're being asked to do is make a judgment about what's more important, and you can argue both sides. So what's really useful to do with these tsunamis, and particularly these case studies, is take the timescale perspective. So using a timescale perspective, physical characteristics become particularly clear in shaping longer term disaster impacts. So we're saying when we analyse the impacts from the longer term, that we're saying that physical characteristics do become the most important factor in determining those impacts. The magnitude is a physical characteristic of tsunamis that can increase the severity of economic impacts. So what we're doing here is we are going super specific with the lens with which we are looking at this particular impact here. So we're going, it's not only timescale, longer term, we're looking at magnitude and we're looking at economic impact. The more specific you can be with your particular judgment, the higher level mark you are going to attain. So with Tohoku 2011, the 9 magnitude earthquake created a larger than expected tsunami which overtopped the 10-meter seawall at the Fukushima nuclear power plant, leading to a level 7 nuclear meltdown. Not only did this result in $100 billion in cleanup costs, there were longer-term impacts on Japan's energy security as public sentiment grew against nuclear power. Now that will have an economic impact because now they're having to source energy from more expensive foreign sources. We're bringing in a little bit of carbon EQ2 here, so we're being synoptic. You'll get credit for being synoptic. Similarly, the Indian Ocean 2004 tsunami, its magnitude resulted in large-scale inundation of agricultural land, which increased the salinity of soils and therefore resulted in 2 years of reduced crop yields, reducing agricultural incomes. And then, as expected, we've got to come in with our good old evaluation paragraph or our good old assessment paragraph. Whereas when we consider shorter term social impacts, so once again, we're putting the timestamp on it and we're also putting the type of impact on it as well. 2 ways of being evaluative, 2 perspectives that we're giving here. We could consider that human vulnerabilities once again play more of a role. Tohoku 2011, the death toll was 16,000 due to demographic characteristics of the local population. 56% of the deaths were in the 65 plus age bracket, 23% of the population. According to the Disaster Risk Age Index, the elderly lack coping capacity. This is due to less mobility and immunity. Similarly, with the Indian Ocean 2004, there were 225,000 deaths, and this was mainly caused by limited efforts to modify the resilience or modify the vulnerability through early warning systems and evacuation planning. So there we go. So we've taken two case studies and we've essentially looked at different aspects of those case studies and used different statistics, different figures to justify different viewpoints. That's the secret with A-Level Geography. With Pinatubo 1991 and Turkey 2000 and Turkey 2023, it's very useful to look at these from the people perspective, from the stakeholder perspective. The stakeholder perspective is always an easy one to deploy, particularly in a synoptic module like Tectonics. So let's see how we can use it with Pinatubo. So from the stakeholder perspective, it's also useful, and the influence of physical characteristics will be higher for some stakeholders or key players than others. So you see, it's really useful because when we think about about that word perspective and we think about that word view, a viewpoint is something held by an individual human being, and not all human beings share the same viewpoint on absolutely everything. It's a really easy one to bring in, particularly with an evaluate the view, and then particularly with an assess the view. So it's a very, very useful thing to use. As an example, those working in the agricultural sector, a specific stakeholder, a specific person, a specific group that's impacted by this. Post-1991 eruption of Pinatubo in the Philippines, ashfall killed crops and poisoned many watercourses. Furthermore, this is where you can extend your paragraph, just show off a little bit more range of knowledge. In the months following, due to the Philippines being a multiple hazard zone, nice bit of theory there, the rains from Typhoon Yunya remobilized fallen ash to create a destructive lahar, secondary hazard, remember, that destroyed 42% of rice-bearing cropland and resulted in 650,000 losing their jobs. So these were unavoidable consequences caused by physical characteristics and processes interacting. So it's the emphasis on the fact that these were specific impacts caused by physical characteristics, but the impacts were to a specific group. They would definitely say our lives were significantly more impacted by the physical factors or the physical characteristics of this hazard than the human ones, because actually the human ones in the case of Pinatubo were the human factors that actually increased resilience. The evacuation planning was very good, which reduced social impacts. And then once again we're in with the evaluation, bringing back the importance of human factors. So by contrast, residents who lost loved ones and lost their homes during the 7.8 magnitude earthquake in Turkey 2023 would assert the influence of weak governance over earthquake magnitude, given that in 2018 a building codes amnesty was granted to over 100,000 buildings, leading to large-scale collapse and 50,000 deaths. Plus, members of the armed forces, again another group, would also suggest that the country's response phase was insufficient in reducing deaths. Erdogan reduced the power of the army in disaster response, leading to a delay and less people rescued within that critical 48-hour window, avoidable if governance was stronger. So once again, that summary at the end of the paragraph is absolutely essential if you're looking to really hammer home that point about the judgment that you're making. That comes to the point in every essay where you are probably going to need some kind of summary statement to bring everything together. Now for me in Tectonics, there is no better model or theoretical model to do this than the Swiss cheese model. The scale of disaster in each case is usually going to be extremely context specific. No two disasters are the same, and there are always going to be a mixture of physical, development and governance factors. So all we're trying to decide in each case, usually from the place perspective, is which one of these is the most important within that specific disaster at that specific time. So it works on the concept that a number of physical development and governance factors all line up along a specific disaster trajectory. So in each case, we're taking the combination of physical development and governance factors that results in a very specific outcome in each case. And what we might be able to do is, well, where was the biggest hole? In this case, the biggest hole was physical factors. In another disaster, it may well be the governance factors. So again, we're using another perspective, and it's just kind of place context, place specific. So let's see how this works. And this is what it looks like to summarize using that Swiss cheese model. So ultimately, the extent to which physical characteristics influence disaster scale is place context dependent, thus giving us our final bit of perspective, which in a synoptic module like Tectonics, again, it's just like the stakeholders thing. Place is a really easy one to go for, as is shown by the Swiss cheese model. So get it in there, quote these models. The examiners love seeing those theoretical models in your paragraphs, where disasters occur when physical aligns with specific development and governance factors, as you saw in the diagram. In Bamiran 2006, a shallow focal deck played a part and it increased the intensity of ground shaking. But this aligned with non-aseismic adobe buildings and the lack of trained medical professionals surviving to provide treatment for injury. Very specific, very context-specific things that are aligning and combining to result in, it was 26,000 deaths there, I think. And in Nepal 2015, the topography, again, a physical characteristic, but steep mountainous topography lends itself to landslides and avalanches. And that played a role, obviously, in a number of deaths there. But the lack of transport infrastructure also played a role in delaying aid, search and rescue. So in summary, and this is fine to do this in an assess question, not so much in a 20 marker, but it's fine to say, so in summary, it's difficult to definitively state the importance, or I guess definitively say at a universal level or a global scale, or in every case, physical factors are more important. It's always kind of context dependent. So if you can learn these 4 perspectives, you are not going to be able to just answer any tectonics essay that you come across. You're going to be able to answer any essay within A-Level Geography. And not only that, you're ensuring that you are including debate, comparative thinking, variation across places, and a demonstration of synoptic understanding that links to the fundamental core concepts of geographical thinking. And that is exactly what examiners reward level 3 and level 4 answers. Always comes back from every single examiner's report, this idea that students who did the best were the ones that linked every single paragraph together and linked it back to the question and constructed things as this ongoing debate. And that is what you can do by adopting this perspective approach. So give it a go. So if you're after more videos like this, just hit the subscribe button and even drop your requests in the comments. Maybe you've got a question that you need to do for homework, or maybe you just want some ideas for questions that you could practice that haven't been in past papers and that might be coming up in the summer 2026 exam. Also, don't forget to check out the link in my bio. I am now selling my revision program, which is going to be taking place from March to July. It's on at a bargain price at the moment, yeah, so get in now while the deal's hot. And also some very exciting news coming up about my new app. So plenty going on, plenty to be getting excited about, and I'll see you again in the next video.